With us now is Francis Leach from ABC Grandstand. Francis, good morning. Good to see you. You've been across this issue, of course, for a number of years now. Are you happy to see him go?
Happy to see him go, but it's only really the beginning of the battle for the future of football. If anything, it means that the tough stuff starts now as to what way forward. And my feeling is simply that there cannot be a re-election or an election of a president under the current circumstances in the same format.
We saw that defiant appearance after being re-elected as president, all those assertions that, no, I'm staying, I'm not going anywhere. What do you think has changed in 4 days?
Well, yeah, it's extraordinary. So have a look at Sepp Blatter here, basically barracking for himself after his re-election. It had the sense of like an Eric Honecker or something like that, you know, the dying days of empire, but it was almost comical.
Let's have a look.
I'm not perfect. Nobody is perfect. But we will do a good job together, I'm sure. I thank you so much. I thank you for the trust and confidence. Trust and confidence. Together we go. Let's go, FIFA. Let's go, FIFA. Thank you.
Quite remarkably, so let's go FIFA. I think he's the only person with a FIFA scarf barracking for FIFA. But that changed when Jerome Volker, one of his two ICs, was named by the New York Times last night as somebody who was alleged to have been involved in a $10 million bribe, which was in and around South Africa securing the 2010 FIFA World Cup. And there's a sense that the Swiss prosecutors are now also looking at starting their own investigation and issuing their own indictments. And that, I think, has meant that the circle is closed around Blatter, and he realises that he is the next name to probably pop up in one of these indictments, and that his position was untenable. And that's the reason why we've got to this point today.
Considering it doesn't look likely, or at this stage they're not saying that they're going to remove Qatar or Russia as hosts for those future World Cups. Apart from that, why does it matter? I mean, people are just looking at FIFA going, this is a joke. Even as they took the votes and a couple of people tried to sell their votes before the last vote. I mean, the whole thing just looks comical. Why does it matter for football generally?
It matters that there needs to be an entirely new structure around how the power is dispersed within the game, and that's why the election in its current format can't continue. There needs to be root and branch reform of how FIFA operates, because it's a perverse universe in which they operate. And say a little island nation like Montserrat of 6,000 people has the same voting power as a country like Germany, which is, you know, the current world champions and has a huge football imprint. It simply doesn't make sense, and it means that there is I guess, a perversion of the power base in the game, and that's the way that Sepp Blatter was able to game the system, in a sense, to curry favour with those smaller nations and hold at bay the real power in the game, which is those countries which generate most of the income for the game and you know, provide the biggest spectacle in the game. But there's a really interesting divide here that they can't navigate without problems, in that if the game simply becomes Eurocentric again and it's simply a European power base in the game, then Africa and Asia and Central America and South America will turn its back on the game. So they've got to navigate a way through that. It does include those very important stakeholders in the game, where the game is, you know, the lifeblood in a sense, without undermining those countries that have a level of transparency and integrity in their processes and institutional power to make sure the game is governed properly. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. It'd be like trying to rebuild the UN in a sense, given all the different agendas and the politics involved and very different philosophies on how to get business done.
We know the Football Federation of Australia voted against Sepp Blatter's re-election late last week, but also calls overnight for some sort of action to be taken against that body and its boss, Frank Lowy.
Well, yes, Andrew Jennings has been really strong on this, and credit to Andrew, who is the man who has driven the inquiries into FIFA for a very long time. For the better part of 10 years, he's been an outspoken critic of Sepp Blatter and has confronted him on numerous occasions, and has asked questions about the relationship that Australia, through Frank Lowy and Peter Hegarty, who was their emissary throughout that campaign to win the 2022 World Cup, and where that money went that was spent in the Caribbean. And he was on Late Line with Steve Kinane last night and made it quite clear that he thinks Australia does have questions to answer.
I think Frank Lowy should resign immediately. He's led Australian football into disaster. You can't have a brilliant businessman like Frank Lowy claiming that he didn't know that the money was going to be stolen by Jack Warner. Has he never heard of auditors?
Yes, and that level of incredulity really shared around the world.
Well, it's a real issue, because I've spoken to people who have been on that FFA board who said in the past that questions about corporate governance were often dismissed at board level, and that there was a concern that the FFA was less interested in you know, an audit of its own governance practices as it was in getting business done, which means that there needs to be an inquiry, at least an understanding of what went on and how it went on, so it doesn't happen again. This the game cannot go forward unless there is a complete and utter transparent look at the past so that we can build confidence in the future. And that means that all cards need to be on the table and everything needs to be exposed for what it is.
Now, what, if any, could be the corrupting influence of the incredible power and money involved with sponsorship and advertising?
Oh, it's everything. It's absolutely everything. You know, we spoke about it last week on the program that the last FIFA World Cup had a turnover of $5 billion. You know, it cost Brazil $2 billion to put on. They didn't come out with any real money in their back pocket, and FIFA walked away with a profit over $330 million. So
that aspect of the way that FIFA does its business with the world, the brand of soccer, that needs to be looked at as well.
It does. The way that, say, powerful Western democracies govern themselves when it comes to dealing with issues of corporate governance and the way money is spent, and you know, we guard against patronage and the ability of powerful people just to get their own way. FIFA needs to have a form of that. It's very difficult to do that when you have countries who have very different political systems, weak institutions, and a form of transactional exchange when it comes to doing business and politics. It's not an easy fit, and that's where you'll get that cultural divide between what the Europeans and the powerful Western democracies want and how other people in the world want to see their business done. But somewhere in between that, there needs to be a balance struck, because this is the only chance we get to reform the game. This is the moment now. If it's lost forever.
Francis, really good to talk to you this morning. Thanks so much.
Anytime.
Thanks, Francis.